Hello, friends. If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments.
I took the job because I needed the silence more than the money. Though I needed both badly enough. The Red Mesa fuel stop sat 46 miles east of Winslow, a sun-bleached prefab box pressed against a two-lane highway that carved through chaparral and scrubbed the color of old bone. 4 pumps squatted under a rust-spotted canopy. The third one was wrapped in yellow caution tape that had faded to the color of urine. The building itself looked like something assembled in 1987 and left to cure in the heat. Aluminum siding, narrow windows filmed with dust, a neon sign that buzzed loud enough to hear from the parking apron. I'd been laid off from an auto shop in Phoenix 3 months earlier. The breakup came 2 weeks after that. By August, I was couch surfing and running out of couches. When I saw the posting, night clerk, remote location, quiet shift, cash weekly, I called the number before I could think better of it. The day clerk, Marcy, met me at the door on my first evening. She was maybe 50, with sun-creased skin and gray-streaked hair pulled into a braid that hung to her shoulder blades. She wore a faded denim shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows and moved with the efficiency of someone who'd worked the same routine for decades. Daniel Reyes, she asked, though she already knew. Danny, I said. She nodded once and held the door open. Inside, the air was stale and smelled of old coffee. Motor oil and something sweet I couldn't place. Maybe the jerky display, which covered an entire wall in sun-faded packages that looked like they'd been there since statehood. The counter was Formica, yellowed at the edges, with a bolted-down ashtray and a rotary phone that sat like a museum piece beside the register. Marcy walked me through the basics. Lock the doors at 10. No exceptions. Monitor the pumps from inside. Everything ran on prepay after dark. There was a security camera system, black and white, 4 screens cycling through angles of the lot and interior. The register was old but functional. She showed me how to run cards manually if the reader glitched, which it did often. Bathrooms in back, she said, handing me a ring of keys that felt heavy and overcomplicated for such a small building. Office too, but there's nothing in there you'll need. Coffee machine works if you don't mind it tasting like pennies. I pocketed the keys. Seems straightforward. It is, she said. Then she paused, looked at me for a long moment and reached under the register. Her hand came back with a laminated sheet of paper, corners yellowed and edges worn soft from handling. She set it on the counter between us. At the top, in faded typewriter font, it read, Night Standard Operations, read once, don't memorize aloud. I glanced at her. She didn't smile. What's this? I asked. House rules, Marcy said. You read them. You follow them. You don't ask me why and you don't argue with them. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, the way someone might explain how to change a tire. Arguing is an invitation. I looked down at the page. The list was typed but amended in the margins with 3 different styles of handwriting: blue ink, pencil, black Sharpie. Some of the lines were underlined. One was circled twice. I started to read, but Marcy's hand came down gently on the paper. Not now, she said. Wait until I'm gone. Read it once, then put it under the counter. You'll know where. She tapped the Formica with one fingernail. Lock up at 10. Be out by sunrise. Don't linger. She pulled her keys from a hook by the door and looked back at me one more time. And Danny? The rules aren't a joke. They're not hazing. You follow them, you'll be fine. You don't. She let the sentence trail off, shrugged, and stepped into the golden wash of late afternoon light. Her car, a dusty Corolla, pulled onto the highway and disappeared west. I stood there for a moment, alone in the hum of the refrigerator units and the buzz of the neon. Then I looked down at the laminated page and started reading. The rules were strange, not strange like corporate jargon or OSHA protocol, strange like folklore, like something whispered around a campfire by someone who believed it too much. I read through them twice, slowly, my smile fading with each line. When I finished, I slid the page under the register, into a slim gap between the counter and the frame where the wood had warped. It fit perfectly, like it had been placed there 100 times before. I told myself it was a prank. Desert humor, a way to mess with the new guy. Marcy had probably done this to every night clerk who'd come through. Maybe there was a camera hidden somewhere, and she and the owner were watching me squirm. But the station was quiet, empty. The kind of empty that made you notice the sound of your own breathing. I poured myself a cup of the penny-flavored coffee, leaned against the counter, and watched the highway through the front window. Traffic was sparse. A semi rolled past heading east, followed 20 minutes later by a sedan with California plates. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky bled orange, then purple, then black. At 10 o'clock, I locked the doors. The deadbolt slid home with a sound that felt too final. I turned back to the empty store, the flickering fluorescents, the rows of candy bars and motor oil. And told myself I didn't believe in rules like the ones under that counter, but I didn't take them out and read them again either. I didn't look at the rules again until the third night. The first 2 shifts had been uneventful, quiet in a way that felt almost oppressive, but nothing I couldn't handle. A handful of cars came through before midnight. I ran their cards, printed receipts, watched them drive away. No one tried the doors. No one knocked. The phone never rang. The security monitors cycled through their grainy black and white views. Pump angles, the front door, the narrow corridor to the back office, the lot. I drank bad coffee and restocked shelves that didn't need restocking. I read the labels on beef jerky packages and wondered who bought jalapeno pineapple fusion flavor. I counted ceiling tiles. I watched the clock. By the third night, boredom had settled into my bones like dust. At 11:47 p.m., with no cars on the highway and nothing but silence pressing against the windows, I pulled the laminated page out from under the register and read it again. This time, I read it carefully. Night standard operations, read once, don't memorize aloud. Doors lock at 10 p.m. Do not open for anyone until first light. This one was simple enough. Standard policy for a remote station. I'd locked up at 10 on the dot both nights, and no one had tried to get in. If knocking comes from glass, it's not outside. Don't answer voices that sound like someone you know. I stared at this one. It's not outside. The phrasing was strange, deliberate, like it was trying to communicate something specific. I glanced at the windows. They were dark, reflecting the interior lights back at me. Pump 3 stays dark. If its light goes on, look down, count 10 shelf labels, and dial the landline. Don't speak first. Pump 3 was the one wrapped in caution tape. I'd assumed it was broken. Maybe a fuel leak, maybe faulty wiring. But the rule didn't say it was broken. It said it stayed dark. And if the light came on, I was supposed to call the landline, which Marcy had told me didn't work. Any car after 1 a.m., don't make eye contact. Inventory quietly. They pump, they leave. I'd seen a car come through around 1:30 on the second night. I hadn't thought about eye contact at the time. I'd just processed the payment and gone back to scrolling my phone. But now the instruction felt weighted. Inventory quietly, as if looking too closely might provoke something. At 3:33 a.m. the radio may play. Let the song finish. No tuning, no volume changes. There was a radio on the shelf behind the counter, a small plastic unit crusted with dust. I hadn't turned it on. I wasn't even sure it worked. But according to this rule, it might turn itself on. At a specific time. And I was supposed to let it. Receipts without timestamps go in the metal ashtray. Lights don't read. I looked at the bolted-down ashtray on the counter. It was dented old, the kind you'd find in a 1970s diner. I'd printed maybe 30 receipts over the last 2 nights. All of them had timestamps, don't read. Why would you burn a receipt without reading it first? Do not watch sunrise from inside. Be gone before the horizon edges. This one was underlined in blue ink and circled twice in pencil. Someone had written in the margin in cramped handwriting, "This one is not optional. If you smell rain when the sky is clear, don't go into the lot. Stack coasters until the scent passes." I almost laughed at this one. Rain in Arizona. In August. The desert hadn't seen rain in weeks. The air outside was so dry it pulled moisture from your lungs. There were coasters behind the register. Cheap cardboard circles with a faded Coca-Cola logo. I had no idea what stacking them was supposed to accomplish. I read the list a third time, then slid it back under the counter. The rules felt like a test, or a warning, or both. I told myself they were just another layer of weirdness in a job that was already strange by design, working alone in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but highway and darkness. People got superstitious in isolation. They invented rituals to give themselves a sense of control. That's what I told myself. But my hands were shaking slightly as I poured another cup of coffee. The fluorescents hummed. The neon sign buzzed outside like a trapped wasp. The security monitors flickered, cycling through empty views. I glanced at the clock, 12:04 a.m. The highway beyond the windows was black and silent. I didn't know it yet, but I had already started counting. It happened on the second night after I'd reread the rules. The evening had been typical. Sparse traffic, a handful of customers before 10, then the deadbolt sliding home and the long stretch of quiet. I'd settled into the rhythm of it, monitoring the screens, running inventory in my head, drinking coffee that tasted like rust and old pennies. By midnight, the highway was empty. The heat had bled off the asphalt, but the air inside still felt close, stale, like breathing through a towel. At 12:08 a.m., the light over pump 3 came on. I noticed it on the security monitor first, a sudden bloom of white light in the grainy black and white feed. I looked up at the windows and there it was, the third pump, wrapped in sun-faded caution tape, bathed in the harsh glare of the overhead light. My first instinct was to walk outside and check the breaker box. Faulty wiring, maybe? A short, something mechanical and explainable. But my hand was already moving toward the laminated page under the counter. I pulled it out. Read Rule 3 again. Pump 3 stays dark. If its light goes on, look down, count 10 shelf labels, and dial the landline. Don't speak first. I stood there for a long moment, the page in my hand, staring at the monitor. The light over pump 3 burned steady and wrong, casting long shadows across the concrete. Then I did something I still don't fully understand. I looked down. Not at the monitor. Not at the windows. Down at the shelf directly in front of me. The gum rack. I focused on the labels and started counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3. My heart was beating too fast. I felt ridiculous. I felt afraid. 4, 5, 6. The fluorescents buzzed louder. Or maybe I was just noticing them more. 7, 8, 9 behind me. The rotary phone rang. I froze. It rang again, a shrill, mechanical sound that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. On 10, I reached back and lifted the receiver. There was no static. No hum. Just silence and then a voice. Dry male with a faint accent I couldn't place. Good, the voice said. Do not look outside yet. I opened my mouth. The words came out before I could stop them. What is this? The voice paused. Then, you spoke first. The line went dead. A second later, the light over pump 3 flickered once, twice, and exploded. I heard the glass shatter even through the closed doors. A sharp pop, followed by the patter of fragments hitting concrete. The monitor showed the pump in darkness again, surrounded by a glitter of broken bulb on the ground. I stood frozen, receiver still in my hand, the dial tone droning in my ear. I counted to 30. Then I hung up and checked the security feed. The camera angle showed pump 3 clearly. The light fixture hung empty, filaments dark. The caution tape fluttered slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel from inside. And at the edge of the frame, just barely visible, was a shape. Tall, still, standing beside the pump. I leaned closer to the monitor. Squinting at the pixels, the shape didn't move. It was too dark to make out details, but the silhouette was unmistakable. A person or something person-shaped, standing perfectly motionless in the frame. I glanced at the window. From where I stood, I couldn't see pump 3 directly. The angle was wrong. I'd have to step closer, press my face to the glass. I didn't. Instead, I watched the monitor. The shape remained still for another 10 seconds. Then it moved, not walking but shifting like a video frame catching up to real time. One moment it was beside the pump. The next it was slightly behind it, then slightly to the left. It was moving in increments, adjusting, matching something, matching me. I stepped back from the counter. On the monitor, the shape stepped back. I moved left, it moved left. I stopped breathing. The shape stopped moving. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screen, my pulse hammering in my throat. Eventually, minutes maybe, I forced myself to look away. I walked to the back office, poured a glass of water from the tap and drank it in 3 gulps. When I came back, the monitor showed an empty lot. No shape, no movement, just pump 3, dark and wrapped in caution tape, surrounded by broken glass that glittered like frost under the remaining lights. I didn't go outside to sweep it up. I didn't look at the windows. I sat behind the counter, the laminated page in front of me, and stared at Rule 3 until the words stopped making sense. At 5:50 a.m., I clocked out, locked the door behind me, and walked to my car without looking back. But I heard it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The phone inside the station began to ring. It was still ringing when I reached the highway. Rick Halverson showed up on my 5th night, and I knew immediately he was going to be a problem. He arrived at 12:40 a.m. in a lifted F-150 with KC lights bolted to the roll bar, the engine rumbling loud enough to rattle the windows. He parked at an angle across 2 spaces and climbed out wearing a backward baseball cap, a Carhartt jacket despite the heat, and the kind of grin that said he found everything vaguely amusing. I watched him through the glass as he walked up to the door and tried the handle. Locked. He knocked 3 sharp raps, then peered through the window, shading his eyes with one hand. "Hey!" he called, voice muffled by the glass. "Open up!" I stayed behind the counter and shook my head. He knocked again, harder this time. "Come on, man. I'm Rick, owner's son. My dad sent me to check on you." I pointed at the sign taped to the door. "Prepay only after 10 p.m., no exceptions." Rick stared at the sign, then at me, then laughed. He pulled out his phone, typed something, and a moment later my own phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's cool, dude, I'm not a crackhead, just open the door." I texted back, "Doors stay locked. Rule 1. He read it, frowned, and looked up at me with exaggerated disbelief. "The rules," he said, loud enough that I could hear him clearly. "You're serious?" "That's just... Dude, that's rattlesnake church bullshit. Marcy's been pulling that crap for years. There's no monsters out here except bored meth heads and bad alternators." I didn't respond. Rick knocked again, then stepped back, shaking his head. "All right, fine, keep the doors locked. But I'm telling my dad you're being weird." He walked back to his truck, climbed in, and sat there for a few minutes, scrolling his phone. Then he leaned on the horn 2 long blasts and drove off toward the highway. I watched his taillights disappear and felt a small knot of tension release in my chest. That should have been the end of it. But at 1:07 a.m., the F-150 came back. I saw the headlights first, sweeping across the pumps as the truck pulled into the lot. Rick parked near the door again and climbed out, still grinning, still convinced this was all a game. He walked up to the glass and banged on it with the flat of his hand. Not aggressive, but loud. A friendly rhythm. 3 knocks, pause. 2 knocks. I stood behind the counter and stared at the laminated page in my hand. Rule 1. Doors lock at 10 p.m. Do not open for anyone until first light. Rick knocked again. "Come on, Danny. Don't be like this. I just want a Red Bull. I'll pay double." I didn't move. He pressed his face to the glass, cupped his hands around his eyes. "You really buying this?" "The rules. Man, you're gonna feel like an idiot when you realize it's just..." He stopped mid-sentence. I saw his expression change. The grin faded. He straightened slowly and turned to look at something behind him. Then he walked back to his truck, climbed in, and started the engine. The headlights came on, and then they went out. Not dimmed. Not turned off. Out, like someone had pinched a wick. The engine kept running for a few seconds, a low idle that I could hear even through the glass, and then it died too. The sudden silence was so complete it felt physical, like a weight pressing against my eardrums. Rick sat in the truck for a moment, silhouetted against the faint glow of the dashboard. Then he opened the door and stepped out. He didn't look back at the station. He walked toward the highway slowly, hands in his pockets, and that's when I smelled it. Rain. Cold. Clean, unmistakable. The scent of wet earth and ozone. So strong I could taste it in the back of my throat. I looked at the monitor. The night was clear. Not a cloud in the sky. The desert stretched flat and empty under a bone-white moon. But I could smell rain. Rule 8. If you smell rain when the sky is clear, don't go into the lot. Stack coasters until the scent passes. My hands were already moving. I grabbed the stack of cardboard coasters from behind the register and started placing them on the counter, one by one in neat rows. I didn't know why. I didn't question it, I just stacked 1, 2, 3. The smell grew stronger. 4, 5, 6. On the monitor, Rick's truck sat motionless in the lot door hanging open. But Rick was gone. I couldn't see him on any of the camera angles. 7, 8, 9. The fluorescence flickered 10, 11, 12. The smell began to fade. I kept stacking until I'd used every coaster, maybe 40 in total. By the time I finished, the scent was gone completely, replaced by the familiar staleness of old coffee and sun-baked plastic. I looked at the monitor again. The truck was still there. But the door was closed now. And there were no footprints in the dust around it. I waited. At 5 a.m., when the first pale edge of light touched the horizon, I unlocked the door and walked out to the lot. The air was cool and dry. No rain, no dew. The ground was hard and cracked, the same as it had been for weeks. Rick's truck sat near the pumps, hood cold. Keys in the ignition. The driver's seat was empty. I checked the cab, the bed, the ground around it. No sign of him. No footprints leading away. Just tire tracks that angled off the pavement and stopped abruptly at the edge of the scrub where no road ran. I called the number Rick had texted me from. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried the owner, Rick's father, listed in the employee contact sheet in the back office. No answer. I left a message. He never called back. By the time Marcy arrived at 6 a.m., I'd already decided not to tell her. What would I say? That Rick had disappeared, that his truck smelled faintly of rain, even though the seats were dry. I handed her the keys and walked to my car without a word. In my pocket, the laminated page felt heavier than paper should. I couldn't sleep after Rick disappeared. I went back to the motel, lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling until the sun was high and hot and the air conditioner rattled itself into submission. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. What had Rick seen when he turned away from the glass? Why had his truck gone dark? Where had he gone? And the bigger question, the one I didn't want to ask, what was I working for? That night I arrived early. 9:30 p.m., half an hour before Marcy's shift ended. She raised an eyebrow when I walked in but didn't comment. I made coffee, checked the register and waited for her to leave. The moment her Corolla disappeared down the highway, I locked the doors and went to the back office. I'd barely glanced at it during my previous shifts. It was a cramped, windowless space with a metal desk, a file cabinet, and a corkboard covered in faded notices and delivery invoices. A coffee can sat on the desk, filled with what looked like old coins. The air smelled like dust and old paper. I started with the file cabinet. The top drawer was stuffed with employee records, W-2 forms, hire dates, emergency contacts. I flipped through them, recognizing no names, until I found one labeled Reyes Daniel. My own file, freshly printed. Beneath it were older files, some dating back to the early 2000s, others to the 90s. 3 of the files had names circled in red ink. Torres, 1989, Huang, 1997, DeWitt, 2006. In the margin beside each name, someone had written the same word in grease pencil, stayed. I opened the first file, Torres. Employment start date, June 1989. No termination date, just a handwritten note clipped to the top. Did not leave before sunrise. Last seen 7:15 a.m. The second file, Huang, was similar. Start date, March 1997, no termination date. The note read, violated Rule 2, spoke to knocking. No contact after DeWitt's file had no note. Just a photocopy of a Sheriff's Department missing person report, dated October 2006. I sat back. The files spread across the desk, my pulse too loud in my ears. 3 people, separated by years, all-night clerks. All gone. I shoved the files back into the drawer and opened the next one. This one was full of logbooks, spiral-bound notebooks with dates scrawled on the covers. I pulled out the one marked 1997-2001 and flipped it open. The entries were mundane at first, fuel deliveries, inventory counts, notes about broken equipment. But in the margins, in a dozen different hands, were warnings. If you hear your mama ask for you, she's dead or it's lying. Don't say home out loud after 2 a.m. It listens for directions. Pump 3 is a mirror. Don't give it your eyes. The radio plays old songs. If you recognize one you never learned, don't try to remember where. Sunrise is when it feeds. Get out early. I flipped to another page. This one had a list of names, drivers maybe, or customers. Most were crossed out. Besides, some of the names were notes. Left at 11:45 p.m. eastbound. Did not log arrival Holbrook, delivered fuel 1 out a.m. Did not return to depot. Sedan, California plates. Last seen 3:30 a.m. Vehicle recovered 2 miles east. No occupant. At the bottom of the page, in block letters, do not give directions after midnight. I kept reading. Another page listed rules, variations on the ones Marcy had given me, written in different styles, amended and corrected. Locked doors at 10, no exceptions. Not for cops, not for family, not for anyone. If pump 3 lights, do not go outside. Call the landline. Let it answer. Receipts with no time, how to wrong. Burn, don't read. Don't ask why. 1 page had been torn out. Only the ragged edge remained, and in the margin someone had written, he asked what it wanted. Bad question. I was so absorbed in the logbooks that I didn't notice the time until I heard the fluorescence buzz louder, almost angry. I checked my watch, 11:58 p.m. I closed the logbook, stood and walked back to the counter. The station felt different now. The same layout, the same hum of refrigerators and neon, but heavier. Like the walls were holding their breath. I glanced at the coffee can on the desk before I left the office. It was filled with old coins, silver dollars, buffalo nickels, mercury dimes. I picked one up. It was ice cold, slick with condensation, even though the office was an oven. I put it back and wiped my hand on my jeans. The cold stayed on my fingers for almost an hour. Ralph showed up on my 7th night. I'd just finished restocking the candy aisle, a task I'd stretched to fill the dead hours between midnight and 2 a.m. when I heard the low growl of a diesel engine outside. I looked up at the monitor and saw a tanker truck pulling into the lot. The words Desert Fuel Solutions stenciled on the side in faded red letters. The driver climbed out slowly, favoring his left leg, and walked toward the building. He was older, late 50s maybe, with a sun-creased face, a salt and pepper beard, and a limp that suggested old injury rather than age. He wore a canvas jacket and a ball cap pulled low. He stopped just outside the door and knocked. 3 quick raps. I walked over, keys in hand, and started to unlock the deadbolt. "Don't," he said. I paused, my hand on the key. He pointed at the glass. "You locked at 10? "Yeah," I said. He nodded, took a step back, and leaned against the doorframe. "Good, keep it that way." "I don't need to come in." I frowned. "You're here for the fuel delivery?" "I am," he said, "but I don't cross the threshold after dark." "Not here." He pulled a clipboard from under his jacket and tapped it against the glass. "Delivery slip." "I'll leave it by the door." "You can grab it when I'm gone. Why not just hand it to me?" He looked at me for a long moment, his expression flat. "You read the rules yet?" My stomach tightened. "Yeah, they read you." I blinked. "What?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Desert's not a beast, kid. It's a book. And books don't just get read. They read back. You don't feed it with your eyes, you don't feed it with your answers." He tapped Rule 7 on the laminated page, which I'd left on the counter. "This one ain't superstition. Sunrise is its favorite trick. You think you made it? That's when you stop counting, right?" I didn't know what to say. Ralph set the clipboard down by the door, stepped back, and pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He pressed it against the glass. It was a photocopy, smudged, faded, but legible. 2 additional rules handwritten in block letters. If the radio plays a song you know but can't remember learning, let it play. It's paying a toll. Never give directions after midnight. Offer light water and inside. No pointing. No place names. He folded the paper and slipped it back into his pocket. "You got those memorized?" Yeah, I said. "Good, because the ones Marcy gave you, those are the basics. These are the ones that keep you from ending up like the others." "What others?" Ralph's expression darkened. "Torres, Huang, DeWitt, and about 6 more whose names didn't make it into the files." He tapped the glass again. "This place eats people, Danny. Slow, quiet. You won't even notice until it's too late. You follow the rules, you might walk out. You break them." He shrugged. "You stay. What is it?" I asked. "What's out here?" "Don't know," Ralph said. "Don't want to know. But I've been running this route since '97, and I've learned not to ask questions that want answers." He turned and started walking back to his truck, the limp more pronounced now. "Wait," I called. "How long did you say you've been..." but he was already climbing into the cab. The engine roared to life, and the tanker pulled out of the lot, heading east down the highway. I watched until the taillights disappeared, then looked at the delivery slip by the door. It was dated 1997. I picked it up. The ink was fresh, the paper was warm, and at the bottom, in Ralph's handwriting, were 2 words, "Good luck." I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled the old invoices from the corkboard in the office. One of them was a fuel delivery receipt, dated August 1997, signed by a driver named Ralph Ortega. Beneath it was a newspaper clipping, yellowed, "Brittle," dated October 1997. The headline read, "Local driver missing after delivery route. Truck found abandoned. Near Red Mesa." I read it twice. Then I put it back on the corkboard and walked out of the office. My hands shaking, the fluorescence buzzed. The neon hummed. The highway outside was black and empty. And somewhere in the back of my mind I heard Ralph's voice. "You think you made it? That's when you stop counting, right?" It happened on my 9th night and it almost broke me. The shift had been quiet up to that point. No cars after midnight, no lights over pump 3, no radio. Just the familiar hum of the refrigerators and the tick of the clock above the register. I'd fallen into a kind of trance, restocking shelves that didn't need restocking, wiping down counters that were already clean. At 1:36 a.m., the bell by the back door rang. I froze. There was a dinner bell mounted beside the back entrance, a dented brass thing someone had nailed to the doorframe years ago. The kind you'd ring to call ranch hands in for supper. I'd noticed it my first night, but never heard it make a sound. The clapper was rusted in place, but now it rang, clear, bright, unmistakable. I set down the rag I'd been holding and walked slowly toward the back hallway, my pulse too loud in my ears. Then I heard the knocking, not frantic, not aggressive, just 3 soft knuckles against the metal door, patient and deliberate, and then a voice. "Danny?" I stopped. The voice was my mother's. "Danny, mijo, abre. Your tio's truck broke down. It's cold out here." My breath caught in my throat. The cadence was perfect, the slight roll of the R, the way she dropped into Spanish mid-sentence, the particular mix of concern and exasperation that had colored her voice my entire childhood. I hadn't spoken to my mother in weeks, not since the breakup, when I'd ignored her calls and let her messages pile up because I couldn't handle her asking how I was. But this was her voice. I knew it the way you know the rhythm of your own heartbeat. "Danny, please. I can see the light on. Just open the door." My hand reached for the deadbolt and stopped. Rule 2. If knocking comes from glass, it's not outside. Don't answer voices that sound like someone you know. The rule didn't specify the back door. It said glass. But the metal door had a narrow window, wire reinforced, grimy, too small to see through clearly. I looked down away from the door and focused on the shelf beside me. Cleaning supplies. I counted the labels, my lips moving soundlessly. 1 Ajax, 2 Windex, 3 paper towels. "Danny, what are you doing?" "Abre, por favor. 4 bleach, 5 trash bags. I'm your mother." "You know me." Just open the door. 6 sponges, 7 disinfectant spray. My hands were shaking. I heard my own voice, distant and cracked. "Who are you?" Silence. Then the voice came again, softer now, coaxing. "Mijo, don't be like this. It's me." "You know it's me." 8. Mop heads. On 8, the landline rang. I turned and ran back to the counter, grabbed the receiver on the second ring, and pressed it to my ear. The dry voice on the other end said, "Water and light." "What?" "Water and light." No directions, then the line went dead. I stood there, the receiver humming dial tone, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might vomit. Water and light. I grabbed a sealed bottle of water from the refrigerator case and carried it to the front vestibule. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I unlocked the inner door, just the vestibule, not the exterior door. Set the bottle on the rubber mat and stepped back. Then I flipped the switch for the canopy floods. The lot lit up bright and harsh, every shadow thrown into sharp relief. I did not look outside. I kept my eyes on the floor and walked backward to the counter. For a long time, nothing happened. Then I heard the bell ring again, once, soft and clear, and then nothing. I waited. At 2:15 a.m., I forced myself to check the vestibule. The water bottle was gone. The cap was still sealed. The label was unwrinkled, as if it had never been touched, but the bottle was gone. I locked the inner vestibule door and went back to the counter. My legs felt weak. I sat on the stool and stared at the security monitors, watching the empty lot, the silent pumps, the dark highway. At 3:10 a.m., something passed the window. I saw it on the monitor first, a shape moving across the camera's field of view, tall and deliberate, with a stride that was too smooth, too even. It didn't stop. It didn't pause to look in. It just moved past the glass, slow and steady, like someone taking a walk. I smelled rain. I grabbed the coasters and started stacking. 1, 2, 3. The smell grew stronger, almost overwhelming. Wet earth, petrichor, the electric tang of a storm. 4, 5, 6. The fluorescence flickered. The neon buzzed louder. 7, 8, 9. The shape on the monitor stopped. It stood just outside the frame at the edge of the light. 10, 11, 12. The smell began to fade. I kept stacking until I ran out of coasters. By the time I finished, the scent was gone, replaced by stale air and old coffee. On the monitor, the lot was empty, but I could still feel it, something just beyond the glass, patient and waiting. I stayed behind the counter until 5:18 a.m. When the eastern sky began to lighten, I grabbed my keys, clocked out, and walked to my car without looking back. Behind me, as I reached the parking apron, I heard the landline begin to ring. It rang and rang and rang. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove west toward Winslow. It was still ringing when I reached the highway. The next night was Saturday, payday. I almost didn't go back. I sat in the Motel 6 parking lot for 3 hours, staring at my phone, drafting and deleting a text to Marcy. I can't do this anymore. But I didn't send it. I needed the money. I needed the quiet. And some part of me, small, irrational, stubborn, needed to know if I could survive one more night. So I drove out to the station. Marcy handed me the keys without a word, her eyes lingering on my face longer than usual, and left. I locked the doors at 10 and brewed a pot of coffee I knew I wouldn't drink. The night started normally. A sedan pulled in at 11:20, pumped gas, and left. A semi rolled past at 11:50 without stopping. The highway was quiet. The air was dry and still. At 12:59 a.m., a car glided into the lot. I noticed it on the monitor first. A dark sedan, older model, headlights dim. It pulled up to pump 2, and the driver's door opened. No one got out. The door just hung open, interior dark, the dome light either broken or off. I watched the monitor, waiting for the driver to appear. At 1:03 a.m., the radio turned on. I spun toward the shelf behind me. The little plastic radio, dusty, ancient, untouched, was on, the dial glowing faint green. Static hissed, then resolved into music. A slow, warbling melody. Familiar but wrong, like a song I'd heard in a dream. Rule 5. At 3:33 a.m. the radio may play. Let the song finish. No tuning, no volume changes. But it wasn't 3:33, it was 1:03. I stared at the clock, then back at the radio. The song continued, distorted, stretched. At 1:07 a.m. the light over pump 3 came on. I dropped my gaze immediately, focusing on the shelf in front of me. Gum labels. Spearmint, peppermint, cinnamon. Rule 3. Look down. Count 10 shelf labels and dial the landline. 1, 2, 3. The fluorescence buzzed louder. A frantic insect whine. 4, 5, 6. On the monitor. Something sat down at the window stool. Not a person, a shadow. The outline of a hat brim. A slump of shoulders, but no body beneath it. Just a darker patch of air shaped like someone waiting. 7, 8, 9. I reached for the landline. It rang before I could lift the receiver. On 10, I answered. The dry voice said, "Good, now the song." "It's not 3:33 yet," I said. "Let it play." The line went dead. I set the receiver down and looked at the clock. 1:12 a.m. The radio continued its warped melody. The shadow at the window stool didn't move. The light over pump 3 burned steady, and then I smelled rain. Rule 8. If you smell rain when the sky is clear, don't go into the lot. Stack coasters until the scent passes. I grabbed the coasters and started stacking, my hands moving fast, sloppy. The smell was overpowering, cold, wet, electric. The sedan's fuel pump clicked. I glanced at the monitor. The nozzle was in the tank, fuel running, but the meter on pump 2 didn't move. The numbers stayed frozen at 0. I kept stacking. 15, 16, 17. A figure appeared beside the sedan. tall still, facing the station. I couldn't see details. The camera was too grainy, but I could feel its attention. Sharp and patient. 18, 19, 20. The thermal receipt printer whirred to life and spat out a slip of paper. I grabbed it without thinking, glanced at it and froze. No timestamp. Just a string of numbers and symbols that didn't make sense. Rule 6. Receipts without timestamps go in the metal ashtray. Light, don't read. I crumpled the receipt, shoved it into the ashtray and fumbled for the lighter behind the register. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to strike the flint. The paper caught, curling into black ash. The smell was wrong, sweet, coppery, like old blood. The neon outside steadied. I kept stacking coasters. 25. 26. The sedan's door closed. The figure stood beside it, motionless. 30. 31. The smell of rain began to fade. 35. 36. The radio song ended cleanly, mid-note, as if someone had lifted the needle from a record. I set down the last coaster and looked at the clock. 3:33 a.m. The lot was silent. On the monitor, the sedan sat at pump 2, door closed, no figure beside it. The shadow at the window stool was gone. The light over pump 3 flickered once and went dark. The phone rang. I picked it up. "Good," the dry voice said. "Now wait." "For what?" "Sunrise." The line went dead. I sat behind the counter, every muscle tense, and watched the clock. At 4:15 a.m. the sedan's door opened. A figure stood, too tall, joints bending in wrong places, and walked toward the glass. It stopped just outside the window, pressed one long hand to the pane and tilted its head. Then it spoke. Its voice was soft, almost kind. "Which way gets me home?" I looked down at the counter, at the laminated rules, at Ralph's handwritten note in my pocket: "Never give directions after midnight. Offer light, water, and inside. No pointing." "No place names, lights in here," I said, my voice hoarse. "Water, too. You're welcome inside when the doors open at first light." I didn't point. I didn't say east or west. I didn't name a town. The figure stood there for a long time. Then it stepped back, turned, and walked toward the sedan. It climbed in. The door closed. The engine didn't start. The car just sat there, motionless, until the sky began to pale. At 5:18 a.m., the first edge of sunlight touched the horizon. Rule 7. Do not watch sunrise from inside. Be gone before the horizon edges. I grabbed my keys, my phone, my jacket, and ran for the door. I didn't clock out. I didn't lock up. I just ran. As I reached my car, I heard the landline ringing again, shrill. Frantic, endless, I got in, started the engine, and drove west. In the rearview mirror, the sedan was still parked at pump 2, and standing beside it, watching me leave, was the figure. It didn't wave, it didn't move, it just watched. I called Marcy from the parking lot of a McDonald's in Holbrook. It was 6:47 a.m. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Danny?" "I can't," my voice cracked. "I can't come back." There was a long pause. "Then you made it out?" Yeah. I left early, before sunrise." "I'm sorry, it's okay," she said quietly. "You did good, kid. I quit. I'm sorry." "I know it's short notice, but I can't." "I know," she said. "It's okay." She hung up. I sat in my car for another hour, staring at nothing, trying to convince myself it was over. At 8:30 a.m., Marcy arrived at the Red Mesa fuel stop. She unlocked the door, walked inside, and found everything in order. The register was balanced. The coffee pot was off. The doors were locked from the inside, and under the counter, in the narrow gap where the laminated rules had always lived, was a fresh sheet of paper. Same typewriter font. Same yellowed edges, same amendments in 3 different hands, but at the bottom, in a narrow, spidery script she didn't recognize, was a new line. "If he asks about Danny, say he left before dawn. Do not tell him what he heard on the phone." Marcy folded the page carefully and slid it back into the gap. Then she poured herself a cup of coffee, sat behind the counter, and watched the security monitors. On the screen, the lot looked ordinary. 4 pumps, a sweep of scrub, an empty highway stretching east and west. At the edge of the frame, the light over pump 3 flickered once, Soft, deliberate, like a breath. And then it went dark. Optional legacy. The next hire. Quiet nights, reliable pay. 7 days later, a job posting appeared on a community board outside the Winslow Public Library. Night clerk needed Red Mesa fuel stop. Mile 46 East quiet nights. Reliable pay, no experience required, call for details. A college kid named Sam Torres, 22, studying environmental science at NCC, perpetually broke, screenshotted the listing and texted it to a friend. LL haunted 7-Eleven but in tumbleweeds. Might actually apply though. 15 HR is 15 HR that evening. Sam and a roommate drove out to the station to scope it out. They pulled into the lot at 7:45 p.m., just as the sun was setting. The building looked tired but clean. The neon buzzed softly. A woman in a denim shirt, Marcy, waved from behind the glass. They walked inside. "You're here about the night job?" Marcy asked. "Maybe," Sam said. "Depends." "What's the catch?" Marcy smiled thinly and reached under the register. She pulled out a laminated sheet of paper and slid it across the counter. "Read once," she said. "Don't memorize aloud." Sam picked it up. The roommate leaned over to read along. At the top, in faded typewriter font, Night Standard Operations. Sam scanned the list, grinning. "This is a joke, right?" Marcy didn't answer. The roommate nudged Sam. "Dude, Rule 8. If you smell rain when the sky is clear..." They both laughed. Sam folded the paper and tucked it into a jacket pocket. "All right, I'll think about it." Marcy nodded. "Take your time. We're always hiring." They left, still laughing, and drove back toward Winslow as the sky deepened to black. Inside the station, Marcy turned off the lights, locked the doors, and walked to her car. Behind her, the radio on the shelf crackled softly, like it was clearing its throat, and somewhere beyond the pumps, out past the edge of the light, the coyotes fell silent, listening, waiting, as if the highway itself were leaning in to hear the next mistake.